I grew up in Lagos, Nigeria. I came from a close-knit family, even though I came from a poor family. But they gave me education with the instruction that this is the tool that will help me to dig my way out of poverty and ignorance. I came without a dime in my pocket. All I had was big dreams, determination to succeed, and the resilience. So coming from another country gave me that insight to be able to understand and deal with people from different backgrounds.
I was walking into Kroger to pick up a prescription for my mom. Upon approaching the pharmacy, I slipped and fell in some liquid. I went to see my regular doctor, and that is when I knew that there was more going on from that fall. I then called Mr. Alawali, talked to him and let him know what was going on. I could just say that he's very professional and knowledgeable about what he does. He's very passionate about what he does, and he cares about his clients. I felt like I was a part of the Alawali family.
The goal is to make sure that our clients will leave feeling that someone gets them, knowing that someone was able to be the voice for them.
We needed an attorney because we needed somebody who understood the relationship between our case and the law. We had been through 4 different lawyers. We were very desperate. We knew from what we had heard that Emmanuel Alawali was the man, who could take us through that experience and see us through and give us the kind of outcome we were looking for. For him, your case is personal. He gave us hope. He gave us encouragement, and we knew that we had found the right man that would see us through.
Just know that when you're coming through the door, you're coming in through a place where you will be accepted and welcome as family, where you'll be seen as a person. At the Alawali Law Firm, we get you. We understand you. Trust us. Welcome to this wonderful episode of Legal Angle with Emmanuel the Law Alawali. My guest today is someone who is very familiar with the screen and the print. He's been special guest on Court TV. He's also an expert on USA Today. He's a defense attorney. He specializes in cases that a lot of other lawyers will turn down. Serious felony cases. We're talking about murders, rapes, assault. He's the man. And he's been on a roll in these past few months, just winning cases, killing it, defending it, and just winning. Welcome to the show, my friend, Dodd Gassamkani.
Thank you so much, Manny. You want to start by saying that your story is truly, truly an inspiration, and I'm truly honored to be on your show.
Oh, thank you. And truly honored to be interviewing you as well. I'm sure you have a great story to tell, and that's why we're here. We want to hear your story. Tell us, who is Dodd Gassamkani?
Well, thank you, Manny. So, I grew up in California. I've lived in California my entire life. My parents immigrated to this country from Iran in 1973. They moved to Northern California. I grew up in Northern California. From where I live in San Diego, it's about 6 to 7 hours away from where I grew up. I went to elementary school there. I went to high school there. My father owned a pizza place my entire life. So as I grew up, my father owned a pizza place called Round Table Pizza. It's really famous here in especially Northern California, but Round Table Pizza is a pretty famous pizza joint here in California. So my entire life, we had this pizza place. I worked there all through elementary school, junior high, high school. I learned the value of family, work ethic. I went to college at Santa Clara University. And then after I graduated Santa Clara University, I wanted to pursue my dream of being an attorney. So I applied to law school, and fate has it, I ended up here in San Diego. I moved here in 1998. I started working at the public defender in San Diego County in 2004 after I graduated law school. I worked at the San Diego public defender from 2004 all the way to 2014. So I did about 10 years at the public defender's office where I tried every type of case you can think of, from low level, misdemeanor resisting arrest, DUI, domestic violence, all the way up until, murder, rape, child molestation, 3 strikes, burglaries, robberies, you name it. I've handled the case, and I've probably taken that type of case to trial. I've done almost 100 jury trials. In my, now 19 years. I left the public defender in 2014. And since 2014, I've had my firm Dodd Law. We're here in San Diego, and I've had the firm from 2014 until now. And really all I do is criminal defense. I'm exclusively criminal defense. I don't do any other area of law. I don't touch, personal injury. I don't do contracts, wills, and trust. And everybody always says, well, Dodd, why don't you do any other area of law? And it's simple, because the consequences in a criminal case are so severe that I cannot focus any of my attention on any other area of law. So if you come to us, you hire us, you're going to have my full attention. And that's why I exclusively for 19 years have done criminal defense. And that's all I will do for the rest of my career, because the way I look at it is, you're putting your fate in my hands. We owe it to you. So that's a little bit about myself.
Wow, thank you. Oh, you grew up with parents who immigrated from Iran.
That's correct.
What was that like, being raised by immigrant parents and owning the
Well, I'll
pizza
be
shop?
honest with you. Being raised by Iranian immigrants, especially in the early 80s, was difficult. We had a lot of, hostility towards Iranians. We got, my sisters and I, we got picked on a lot. We got bullied a lot. Our house got, egged and toilet papered multiple times, people making multiple threats, but it's what really defined who we are and what makes us who we are today.
How did you handle those kind of, physical and just overt rejection at that young age?
Well, it was difficult. I mean, I was really young. I was in elementary school. I didn't really know, what to do other than kind of just hold it all in and, come home and, tell my mom. And my mom was, the one where if we told her, someone was bullying us at school, you can count on my mom to go knock on the door of that person's house to confront them. So my mom numerous times would, confront my friends, confront their families, fight, fight people's dads in the middle of the street. But that's just, who she was. If anyone picked on her kids, she was going to defend us, and she did that.
Your mom was a defender of the weak. I guess that's where you got your fighting spirit from. So, what
That's right.
made the son of Iranian immigrants with a pizza shop decide to become an attorney?
That's a great question. Since I was a kid, all I remember is I want to be a lawyer. I want to be a lawyer. I'm going to be a lawyer. And my mom would tell everybody, "Hey, he's going to be a lawyer." This is from going on from first or second grade. I wanted to be a lawyer. And then as I went to junior high, as I went to high school, that was just what I was going to do. I worked at my dad's pizza place with the ultimate goal of I'm going to go to college, I'm going to go to law school, I'm going to become a lawyer. I didn't know at that point what kind of lawyer I wanted to be. All I know is that I wanted to be a lawyer. And then as I started going to high school and college and I started seeing all the injustices, at that point, I made it very clear that I will be a defense attorney. So I started interning at the San Diego Public Defender, when I was in law school. I interned there for 2 years and ended up working there after I graduated.
So, so you had a moment in time that you realized that criminal law isn't for you, and you never wavered.
That's right. That's right. Once I once I said, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and there was no looking back. I want to be a criminal lawyer. I'm going to be a lifelong criminal lawyer. And I started focusing on, what can I do to be the best criminal lawyer? Not just criminal lawyer, criminal trial lawyer. Anyone could be a criminal lawyer, but at the end of the day, who is a criminal trial lawyer? Who's actually taking cases and putting the cases in front of a jury? And I didn't want to be the type of attorney where, took a case and took the first plea. Now, I'm the type of attorney where I took a case and we go all the way on a lot of the cases. So I didn't want to be that plea bargain attorney.
What were those things that you learned while working with your dad, making pizza, delivering pizza, and serving people? What are those lessons that you learned that bled over to your job as an attorney?
Hustle, 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 never give up. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I mean, my dad, he came home, he left in the morning. Before I got up, he was gone. And he was coming home late at night, and all I would hear is my dad come home. I hear the garage door open, and I hear the keys on the counter, and I'd already be asleep. So the only time I really got to see him, was on the weekend. So he was there working from morning till night. And then, when I was junior high, when I was in high school, I started seeing my dad more because I started working there, and I started seeing, how much of a hustle, working and surviving in this country is. I mean, it's just, you got to work and hustle. And if someone's going to knock you down, you got to get right back up. And that's really what my dad did. And to this day, he's still doing it. Not at the pizza place, but in other facets of life.
Wow, you instill the value of hard work and you got to
Right.
hustle to make it. Wow. And what was high school like for you?
I went to a high school in Gilroy, California. And at the time, I didn't know. But now I know it was probably one of the worst high schools in Northern California. Gangs, violence. And if you talk to my mom to this day, my mom will say that was the best high school in Northern California because she didn't know. They grew up in poverty. They grew up in Iran. They grew up in a country where, I mean, everyone was poor. So when they moved over here and, we went to high school, I mean, they're living the American dream. Their kids are living the American dream. So whatever high school they're going to is better than where they came from. So in their eyes, we were going to the best high school. And that's what I thought, at the time. Going to high school where there's guns, drugs, shootings, violence. I thought that's what it was. I grew up thinking, well, this is how life is. And I really didn't realize that that's not how it is until I went to college. I went to college at Santa Clara University. And when I would tell people, hey, I went to Gilroy High, they're like, what? You went to Gilroy High? I'm like, yeah, isn't it, one of the best high schools? I mean, I made it to college. Like, no, that's, actually one of the worst high schools in Northern California. At the time, I didn't know. I thought it was the best high school because that's what my parents were telling us.
Wow, that's the immigrant spirit. They tell you that whatever you have is the best and you make the
Correct.
best of it. That's when you don't feel like you're missing out on anything.
That's right.
Wow, what a lesson. So when you decided to go to law school, how did you decide which one to go to? Since you had no one in the family who has been to law school before.
I knew I wanted to stay in California. I knew I wasn't going to leave California. So I literally applied to every school in California with the hopes that, maybe one of them will take me. And not just one of them took me. I got accepted to 10 of them. So 10 of 12 schools accepted me. Obviously, Stanford and UCLA were the two schools, my two top choices. I didn't get into there. And the funny story is I was actually going to go to Loyola Marymount. I was enrolled in Loyola. I drove down to Loyola in August. I was about to start Loyola Marymount Law School. And I came down here and I drove around the campus, not realizing that Loyola Law School is really not a campus. I was thinking Loyola Law School was just like the undergraduate, where it's a huge campus on the beach. And I didn't know that it was actually in the middle of downtown LA. And when I walked into campus, I told my parents, I'm not going here. There's no way that I'm going to spend the next 3 years living in downtown LA. Hopped in the car, drove 2 hours south to San Diego, where I was already accepted to San Diego, drove down here, went to the law school, found a roommate on the bulletin board, and the rest is history.
Wow, that you made it through law school. And when you graduated from law school, you decided to work with the public defender's office. Why the public defender's office?
I started working at the public defender my first year of law school. So I started interning there first year of law school. I was there for at least a couple years, and I knew I wanted to be a criminal lawyer. I just knew I was never going to be a DA. I always wanted to defend the little guy, defend the underdog, right? I mean, that's just, how I was raised as the underdog. So I always wanted to defend the underdog. It was never even a question in my mind to apply to the DA's office and to be a prosecutor. So I applied to get an internship at the public defender's office. Luckily, they hired me. I got paired up with some fantastic attorneys. I did, various motion work. I got to second chair trials. My second year in law school, I actually made my national television debut. I was on NBC's Law and Order as a second year law school. I wasn't even a lawyer yet, and here I am on NBC's Law and Order, second chairing a big high profile murder case. So that's kind of how my career started.
What was that like to have that kind of opportunity in second year of law school on national TV?
It was
being seen
unbelievable.
as an attorney?
Yeah, to this day, I go back and I watch the actual show, and I look like I was I look like I was 10 years old. I'm like, well, who would want this guy, next to him? I mean, I looked like a little kid when I was defending, back in law school. And obviously, I was in law school. I couldn't do anything, in front of the judge, but, all the behind the scenes and everything with the client, I was tasked to do that. And the show aired about a year after when I was in law school. So when I was in law school, all of a sudden I became like this instant celebrity because I was on NBC's Law and Order, Crime and Punishment, which since then they've discontinued those episodes. It was a very specific episode from 2002 to 2004 where they were just following San Diego criminal cases. But after that, they discontinued the show. The shows still air every now and then on different networks.
And apart from even you started your TV career in second year of law school, you've also appeared on Oxygen, Snapped. You've been on Court TV. You've been the expert for USA Today. What does it feel like?
That's kind of just what gets me going. I love going on these shows and just talking about cases and talking about my cases and doing legal commentary. It's just something that has sparked my interest. And the funny thing is when I was in law school, I was addicted to Court TV. So I would come home, I would study, but as I was studying, Court TV was always on, in the background. And to be honest with you, to this day, some of my closing arguments, some of the lines in my closing arguments are probably plagiarized off of Court TV. Someone said, 15, 20 years ago. So, Court TV was always on in the background. And I remember always telling myself, one day I'm going to have a trial on Court TV. So, I'll be on Court TV. I'll do commentary. I'll do all that. But one day I'll have a trial on Court TV. That hasn't happened, but there's still I still got a long, road ahead of me.
And it's going to happen. Yes.
I hope so.
Tell us about your first murder trial.
So, my first murder trial was when I was a public defender. The murder happened in 2008 here in San Diego County. And I was only, I think, 4 years out of law school. I was still a pretty young attorney. And it was a really high-profile case, extremely high-profile case. And at the time, the public defender's office, we had something called the Profile Homicide Unit. There were about 4 or 5 attorneys that all they did was handle homicide cases. And it went to one of our main guys to handle the case. Well, he said, well, obviously he needs help on the case. So they decided to bring me in. I was a young gun, 4 years out of law school. And here I am with a huge high-profile murder case in San Diego, and I'm working with somebody who's been doing murder cases for 20, 30 years. And it was a case where, the client was a 21-year-old paranoid schizophrenic, and the victim in the case was his best friend and roommate. And it just happened to be that, my client had severe mental health issues. He was taking drugs, smoking weed to drown out all the voices, all the auditory hallucinations. He had visual hallucinations. They worked at a hookah lounge down by the beach. And the way it works with, clients that are mentally ill, when there's one stressor in their life, they could just go off the deep end. And here, the stressor was he got fired, right? And for the majority of the world, getting fired, a lot of us get fired, but when you're paranoid schizophrenic and you're not wired the same as most people, he just completely went on this downward spiral, continued to decompensate, started to hear voices. The voices were telling him to do some really bad things. Then he started smoking weed. His parents came and took him to a treatment facility, and the doctors kicked him out. And they said, he cannot be here. He is not here because he's having audio and visual hallucinations as a result of schizophrenia. He's only here because it's drug-induced psychosis. So they sent him home. And unfortunately, that night, he drank. His roommates were drinking. And he starts hearing these voices, and they're getting louder and louder, and they're telling him to do things. So what he does, and what is very common for somebody who is going through this severe decompensation state, what he did was he took a bunch of salt and he started pouring it all around his house, because the voices were telling him, you got to keep out the evil. You got to keep out the evil. So he did that. And unfortunately, after he did that, the voices continued to tell him that he must kill his roommate. And he, unfortunately, not only did he kill his roommate, he killed his roommate in such a gruesome fashion that to this day I can still see, the autopsy photos. He basically severed every single artery in his neck, basically sawed his head off in his living room, thinking that that's what he was supposed to do, and that's why he poured the salt, all around his bedroom. The vents in his house, he had to close the vents because he thought people in the vents were watching him. So it was a crazy case. And obviously our defense was insanity. And there were about 5 doctors that testified in the case. 3 of them testified for the prosecution, said that he was not insane. 2 of them testified, obviously, for us, and they said he was insane. The prosecutor, knowing that their case was challenging, they ended up hiring the best psychiatrist in the nation, a psychiatrist that's testified in the Malvo case, the sniper case, in the Andrea Yates case where she drowned her children. He testified in all the big high-profile, schizophrenia, insanity cases throughout this country. So they hired this guy. They paid him $100,000 to come in and testify, to say that at the time of the incident, my client was sane. And unfortunately, because of his fame and because of his notoriety and because of all the other famous cases he's testified in, the jury believed him. I mean, we have a guy here who came in, who's testified everywhere. And at the time, 15 years ago, he was a pretty big name. He was all over TV on all the big cases, and they believed him because of his notoriety, because of his fame. And unfortunately, the jury came back and said he was sane, which to this day, I mean, that was my first murder trial, and it was one of those cases where I'm like, there is just no way that the jury made the right decision on this case. I mean, a guy who was in a severely decompensating, who poured salt around his house. How could a jury ethically come back and say this guy was sane, that he knew the nature and quality of his acts, that he knew what he was doing was right from wrong? So to this day, that case, really hurts. But the good thing is, um, he's probably going to get out soon. I mean, this case happened he was convicted in 2010. And, during the guilt phase, they didn't find him guilty of first-degree murder. He was found guilty of second-degree murder. So here in California, second-degree murder is, with the knife allegation, is 16 to life. So he's going to be eligible for parole soon, and he might be, hopefully, will be a free man soon. So that was my first murder trial, which was a pretty crazy experience, as 4 years out of law school to handle a case like this with all the media scrutiny.
I can only imagine then with that 4 years out of law school, you're a young attorney, you're handling this gruesome murder, and it didn't go as planned. How did you handle that loss?
It still hurts. It still hurts to this day. Every few months or so, I'll see the attorney that I handled the case with, and we still talk about it. Like, how did we lose that case? How did we lose? Why did we lose? I mean, to this day, that this many years later, that case hurts, because in our heart of hearts, we knew this guy's crazy. He's absolutely insane. There is no way we should not find this guy not guilty by reason of insanity. And the problem is this: the majority of the country, they think if you find somebody not guilty by reason of insanity, that this is a loophole in the law, and this is a trick by the defense to try to get their client off, where at the end of the day, if you're found not guilty by reason of insanity, you're committed to a state mental hospital for an indefinite term. And that's what jurors cannot wrap their head around, is when you hear the term not guilty by reason of insanity, you think that if you find him not guilty, he's going to walk out the door with you and walk out that courthouse with you, which is extremely misleading. So, what I've always said is we need to change not guilty by reason of insanity. We need to change it across this country, and it needs to be called guilty but insane. And if we change it to guilty but insane, I think we would have way different outcomes in these insanity cases. Because at the end of the day, the public thinks, again, this is a loophole, this is a trick. These attorneys are here trying to throw us a curveball to try to, throw shade at us, where that's not the case. Because if he was convicted, he would just go to a state mental hospital for an indefinite term. So I've always been a big advocate. We need to change insanity to guilty but sane. And if we do that, we will have way different results.
Thank you. We need to change not guilty but insanity to guilty but insane. And that might change how the jury see cases. Wow.
That's right.
That's profound. Yes. When you're meeting with a client for the first time, a person who has been charged with murder, how do you communicate with such a person? How do you assure them that they will get justice?
Well, usually, we first obviously meet with the family. The majority of people that are accused of a crime here of murder here in California, they're set at no bail. So the first thing we do is meet with the family, and meeting with the family of a person accused of murder is difficult, because their life is never going to be the same. No one's life, is ever going to be the same. And here, murder cases could last 2, 3 years. So it's going to be a very stressful process for, us as the attorney, for the family. But then actually, seeing the client, it's challenging, right? I mean, you go and see a client, and I mean, you think to yourself, the odds across this country are that this person will probably never get out again. I mean, that's just the odds, and that's just the sad part of the criminal justice system, that there's a very high probability that the person that I'm, sitting in front of who's accused of murder will never see freedom again. And that's hard. And it's a tough pill to swallow. So, they're very delicate, cases. And, I always say, listen, murder cases are extremely difficult, not only because obviously I'm dealing with the family of, somebody accused of murder, dealing with, somebody who's going to be the defendant in a murder case, but there's also somebody that's dead, right? I mean, you can't, at the end of the day, we're all still humans. So at the end of the day, we go to court and all the victim's family is there. And it's a murder case. There's a dead guy. Someone died. So, you can't just take off your human hat and, not show any emotions. At the end of the day, we're watching video, we're looking at all the autopsy photos, we're seeing, everything in the case. So there's still that human factor and that emotional factor, that's involved in a murder case. And I've always said, any murder case or any, high profile, big type of felony case that I handle, I'm always the second most hated man in that courtroom. Right. I walk in, all the victim's family is in the court, is in the hallway waiting to get let in. And, they're staring at me and they're looking at me like I'm the one, that did something, that I'm the one that, allegedly killed, their loved one or raped or, committed some heinous act against them. So I've always said, as a defense attorney, we're always the second most hated person in that courtroom. And it's tough, just walking in and out of the courtroom, people yelling at you. Just a couple of weeks ago when we won that murder case, the sister of the victim was outside threatening one of my other attorneys, just yelling and just yelling threats. So, they're really difficult, sensitive cases.
Thank you. Yeah, you just mentioned that you just won a murder case just last week. Tell us about that case.
Yeah, there was it was a self-defense case, and there's in a murder case, there's really a few defenses, right? I mean, you're either going self-defense or it wasn't me, and if you're not going self-defense or it wasn't me, then you're going for a lesser. You're going for a second degree murder. You're going for a voluntary manslaughter. You're going for lesser included. In this case, it was a self-defense case, and it was a victim that had a pretty bad, I wouldn't say criminal record, but a history of violence against my client's sister. My client's sister and the victim were in a dating DV type of relationship. So there were several prior bad acts that we had and that we had to litigate, and we had to do motions in limine. And thankfully, the judge allowed all of these prior bad acts in to show at the time where my client pulled the trigger, what was going through his head. Because here in California, for self-defense, you have to have a reasonable, good faith belief that you're about to suffer imminent bodily harm or death. And under California law, you can consider the victim's prior history and prior threats against you or your family in determining whether or not you acted the way you did. So the fact that my client knew about all these prior acts of domestic violence has been threatened before by the victim in the case. The law says that he's justified in acting quicker than any other person would. And thankfully, that's what the jury found.
So what did it feel like when you got that verdict?
Amazing. It was one of those, and there's a lot of cases where you really, really love your client. And this was a case where I loved my client. And I think when you love your client and you have that passion for your client, it shows, and it shows in front of a jury. And It was a very, passionate closing argument. The jury knew I liked him. And, my client is a good guy here. He's a 34-year-old. He worked for TSA, huge Samoan family. They're a family of churchgoers. We had 40 to 50 family members and friends from the church in court, every single day of the trial. So, this wasn't just some Yahoo off the street. He was a good guy with no criminal record, who I've always said from the beginning, all he was doing was trying to defend himself. And thankfully, that's what the jury found.
You gave him his life back.
I gave him his life back. That's really what it comes down to. It's an amazing feeling.
Let's watch a short video. I think we're having a technical difficulty trying to get that video playing. So I'm gonna ask you, when do you decide to take a case? Or when do you decide not to take a case? How do you make that decision?
That's a good question. Every day, we're getting calls, and we're doing consultations, and the question is, why do I not take certain cases? What causes me not to take certain cases? And when I get a case where the client has already gone through multiple attorneys, that's a huge red flag for me. I will never take a case. I won't touch a case if the client comes to me and they're, oh, well, you're our third attorney. Sorry, we're not the firm for you. You can go somewhere else. I'm not going to, touch a case that's already been on, 2-3 attorneys. Number one, I probably know the attorneys. They're friends of mine. I don't want to go through and analyze everything they did. Number two, if you've already been through 2 or 3 attorneys, you're probably a pain. Let's be serious here. You're probably a pain client who will never be satisfied. But the majority of the cases I get that are recently accused, have recently been arrested, and are looking for an attorney, and they don't already have an attorney, then if I usually will take that case. And people always say, well, how are you going to help my loved one? How are you going to help my son? How are you going to help my daughter? Can you make any promises or guarantees to us? And it's simple. I mean, in a criminal case, I can't make any promises. I can't make any guarantees. I cannot guarantee you any outcome. But for the one thing I can guarantee you is that I will take my 19 years of experience and I will fight with every single fiber of my soul to try to get them the best outcome. So that's really the only promise that I can give to any client or any client's family. In this country, we have the presumption of innocence. It's one of the most fundamental principles of our criminal justice system. The problem is, anytime someone is accused of a crime, anytime someone is under a criminal investigation, the rest of society just automatically assumes they're guilty. My clients are good people. A lot of them have made a mistake. Some of them have been wrongfully accused, and I don't think a 1 to 2 second lapse in judgment when someone is going through the darkest moments of their life should define them. They have loved ones, they have family, they have children. This is a time of crisis. When you're charged with a crime, it's a scary time, and we understand that.
For the first time in my life, I got in trouble with the law. I was actually arrested, and I had to go to jail. And it was a horrifying experience. It was terrifying because I had no idea what was going to happen. My biggest fear is if I tried to go through this experience by myself was that I would do it wrong and I'd end up in jail. I was terrified of going to jail. And I didn't think I'd survive.
Here at Gotham County Law, we realize that most of our clients have never needed an attorney before. We want to make sure that we get over that bump in the road, and we're going to get through that together.
Before I met with Dodd, I was in a state of panic. And after meeting with him, he was very reassuring, and I felt like this huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. If someone found themselves in the same position I was in, where they were arrested and facing some sort of criminal charges, I would definitely recommend to not do it by yourself, and I would definitely recommend that they hire Dodd.
Before I met with Dodd, everything was running through my head. I had never been in trouble with the law before. He actually made me feel at ease, and because he saw that I was a nervous wreck. Anytime I had questions, he was always there for me. I would have no doubt in my mind that he would give the same level of service to somebody else that he gave me.
What makes me unique as a criminal defense attorney is I focus only on criminal defense. A lot of people always ask me, well, why do you only practice criminal defense? Why don't you practice any other area of law? And the answer is very simple. In any criminal case, the consequences are just too severe not to only practice criminal defense. A client has put their trust in me, and their fate is in my hands. I have my client's life in my hands. I have my client's liberty in my hands. I have my client's freedom in my hands. I have to only practice criminal defense because I owe it to my client. Choosing the right criminal defense attorney will have a significant impact on the rest of your life.
So, how did Dodd Law started?
Well, 2014, I left the public defender's office and I opened up Gotham County Law at the time. And what I didn't realize was that a lot of people don't like to hire an attorney with a last name they can't pronounce, right? So I did a little bit of soul searching and I said, well, hey, let's change the firm name. So 2017, decided to change it to Dodd Law, and best decision I've ever made. I mean, immediately, the calls start coming in, and it's a brand, Dodd Law, and it's funny because everyone thinks my name is Dodd Law now. No one even knows what my last name is. They just think my name is Dodd Law. And at the time when we changed it to Dodd Law, I didn't think it was going to be like that, but that just become my identity now. So, that's the reason why we transitioned from, the Gotham County Law to Dodd Law. But that was probably a complete game-changing decision.
Wow, game-changing decision, Dodd. Even it can stand for defender of defendants.
That's right.
Or defender of the underdogs.
That's right.
Wow. Dodd, the god of defense. Wow. Yes. I guess you can take that on.
Yes.
So you mentioned that you are always like the second, eighth person or man in the courtroom. How do you handle the vitriol? How do you handle the hate? How do you handle the fact that people will say, who's this comeback defending this comeback? How do you handle that kind of?
At first, when I started, it kind of, got to me, but it just got to the point where I just started accepting that that's just what society thinks. And there's nothing that I'm going to do that's going to change what society thinks about, criminal defense attorneys, what society thinks about people that are accused. And let's be clear, there's a lot of terrible defense attorneys. There's a lot of scumbag, defense attorneys out there who really, give us, a bad name. And, that's what the majority of public think, defense attorneys are. Everyone thinks we're trying to, pull some sort of trick to try to get, our client off. I always talk about that in jury selection. How many of you think, I'm here just trying to get him off? That I'm here as a defense attorney and my job is to try to trick you guys to, try to make him go free. How many of you think that? And to this day, I mean, we still get numerous jurors that think that that's what we do as a defense attorney. And what I've always said is this: everybody hates us until you need us. That I've said that from day one. And when you need us, you realize, how important, we are. We get cases where everyone's guilty. They're guilty. Everyone's guilty. But then all of a sudden your son or daughter is accused of a crime, right? So if your son or daughter is accused of a crime, no one ever wants to think that their son or daughter is guilty. So I tell everybody that, just imagine that it's a family member accused of a crime, your mother, your father, someone in your family is accused of a crime. You're going to give them that presumption of innocence, right? So that's the same presumption of innocence you must give every accused in this country. And it's hard for people to understand that until you make it hit home.
Everyone hates defense attorneys until they or their family members need one.
100%.
Yes. Everyone also makes lawyer jokes until they need a lawyer.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. And if, let's say, a client comes to you, their first meeting, they already confessed to the crime, how do you proceed?
Well, if a client comes and, let's back up. Let's back here. First off, don't ever talk. Okay. Do not ever under any circumstances make any statements to the police. Don't ever find yourself in an interrogation room. Don't ever, go to the police station because you want to clear your name. Don't ever go to the police station because, the police have offered you leniency. If you come in and help us out, we're going to help you out. That's a bunch of nonsense. But there are various cases we get where our clients confess. And if our clients confess, then obviously the case becomes extremely difficult. And it really becomes an issue of, number one, was it a coerced confession? And can we bring in experts to talk about a coerced, confession? If that's all they have, if they have a confession with all other types of, indicia of the crime, then it makes it a lot more difficult. But, when I have a case where a client has admitted to everything, at the end of the day, really what it comes down to is mitigation, right? What can I do, to get you the best possible outcome? So that's what happens when, somebody confesses to a crime.
How about the flip side of it? They haven't spoken to the police, they haven't confessed, but they came to you as an attorney. They told you, what, I did it, but I'm not going to plead guilty. How do you proceed?
Well, our ethical, obviously, my ethical duty as a criminal lawyer is to make sure the state can prove my client guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And, it does put an attorney at a huge ethical dilemma where, for example, somebody comes in and says, hey, I shot her and killed her, but I'm going to trial. And, typically in that type of case, then most ethical attorneys wouldn't have their client testify. You would, your ethical duty as the attorney is to still make the state prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. However, in the chance that your client says, hey, Dodd, I'm going to testify, and if I know that my client is going to get up there and lie, then obviously the state bar, ethical rules tell me that I can just put the client on the stand, because at the end of the day, it's the client's absolute right to testify. I cannot tell them they can't testify or they can testify, but if they want to testify and I know they're going to lie, I just got to ask very open-ended narrative questions. Tell the jury what happened. That's really all I can do as an attorney if I know my client's lying.
A lot of people don't understand the fact that people have a right not to testify at trial. How do you balance that when talking to the jury? Because obviously they will expect, like, oh, well, if you're being accused of a crime, you should go up there and say, no, I didn't do it.
Well, the first thing we always do is, just to back up a little bit, I've always been a firm believer of my client testifying. My motto is this: I ride or die with my client's testimony, because no matter what, no matter how much you tell the jury, no matter how much the judge tells the jury that the client does not have to testify, it's their absolute Fifth Amendment right. Jurors don't care. They don't care. They want to hear from the person who's accused of doing the crime. So, my motto has always been ride or die with your client's testimony. And we do really good prep work on prepping them, for their testimony. But if a client is not going to testify, then we've already talked about it in jury selection. And I do a really good, jury selection process when I know my client is not going to testify, just to hammer it home to the jury that he does not have to testify. So when he does not testify, I can go in front of them at a closing argument and let them know that you promised me that you wouldn't hold this against my client. But the problem is, even though they promise you and they tell you that they're going to be fair and impartial, at the end of the day, everyone's a human, right? Everyone at the end of the day still thinks to themselves, why didn't that guy get up there and tell us what happened? He's the only one that knows. So even though they're telling us they're going to be fair and impartial, really are they? So that's why I've always been a firm believer, have my client testify, and the majority of the cases that I've won, my client has testified. I mean, there's no secret. The jury wants to hear from your client.
Thank you. And based on your experience, what has been the greatest fear that you've noticed, among people accused of murder?
The biggest fear is just the distrust in the system. The distrust in the jury selection process, the fact that they're probably not going to get a cross section of the community. If I have an African American client, a Hispanic client, a Middle Eastern client, right? We're supposed to get a cross section of the community. That's never going to happen. That never happens where you're going to get a cross section of the community. So the number one fear for anybody, and even for us, as the attorney, is the 12 jurors that walk in through those, walk in and ended up, being selected on your jury. Who are they? And I tell all my clients before we go to trial, listen, trial's a crapshoot, right? We're taking 2 dice, we're throwing it up against the wall, and we're hoping the 50 or 60 people that walk in for the jury selection process are going to be fair on that day. That's really, all the jury selection process is. It's dice, throw it up against the wall. And, I've always said this as well. The fact that people come to jury selection and they answer the jury summons and they follow the law already puts the defense at a disadvantage, right? Because the majority of people just throw that summons away. I'm not going to go to jury selection. Well, that's what we want. As the defense attorney, we want those kind of guys. We don't want the rule followers are going to come to court just because they got a letter. So the fact that they're there already puts the defense at a significant disadvantage.
Thank you. And what are those challenges you face as defense attorneys, knowing that the prosecutor, they don't have a lot to lose? Your client has the freedom to lose. What are those challenges you faced?
Well, I've always said, being a prosecutor is an easy job, man. Not to offend, any prosecutors out there that are, watching the show, but, being a prosecutor is not difficult. I mean, you're given the facts, the facts are on your side the majority of the time. And, you just got to get up there and, what happened next, and, what happened, after that. And then it really comes down to all the stress, all the pressure, all the anxiety, everything, falls on the defense attorney.
Do you feel like the prosecutor has it's like the odds are stacked against the defense?
100%. Yeah.
Recently, you wrote that live your life like you're being live streamed. What do you mean?
I put out a video, and I tell all my clients this, that way we're living our life right now with cell phones and cameras everywhere you go, ring camera, surveillance video, you can't go anywhere, without being, recorded. If I walk out right now and I walk up the street, I can guarantee you in that one block, there are probably about 10 different camera angles that caught me, walking down the street. So what I tell everyone is live your life like you're constantly being live streamed, like somebody is constantly recording you, because all it takes in your life is one 5-second decision and you're done. One decision that you make in your life, you're at a grocery store and you start arguing with somebody and 10 people pull out their cell phone and you say something. That night you're on Instagram, you're on TikTok, you're on Facebook Reels, you're all over social media, and here you are, you're a professional, you're a doctor, you're very well respected person in this community, and one 5-second decision and you're done. So that's why I've always said, live your life like you're constantly being live streamed.
Wow, that's a good way to look at it, because you never know. There's
You never know.
always cameras around. Yep. And you don't
Everywhere
want
you
to cut out your worst moment. Mhm.
That's right.
And what does it feel like to be the father of a young soccer superstar, Layla?
Oh wow,
She's
that's
going to be playing in the nationals.
yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. And now that we're on that topic, I had to cancel my trip to Atlanta in 2 weeks. I was coming to Atlanta, but now I got to drive her to Arizona for a big national tournament. So that's what we'll be doing. I mean, the next few years, we're going to be traveling a lot, all over, for her to play soccer. It's a fun time, but there's going to be a lot of traveling involved.
Did you also play soccer as a kid?
I did not, and that's the funny thing is I did not play soccer. I played, baseball. I played football, and I'll be honest with you. When my daughter started soccer, a while back, I didn't really even know the rules of soccer. In all transparency, I didn't know the rules of soccer, and now I understand it because now I go to all her games. But I never grew up playing soccer.
Wow, you must be so proud of her.
We are.
And how, yeah, you told us how you grew up. Your father had a store, making pizza and serving people. Your mom was the defender of the week. How how did it feel knowing that they raised a son like you, who now became defender of the week, an attorney?
Well, thanks for saying that. I mean, it feels good to be honest with you. I mean, I owe it. I owe everything to, what they did, and I don't think, if I grew up any other way, I don't think I would have ended up, being a criminal defense lawyer, the trial lawyer that I am today, because I saw the struggles every single day, especially in the in the early 80s. And, a lot of people don't realize in, 1982, 83, 84, the relations between US and Iran were horrible. They were absolutely terrible. So if you, saw, an Iranian kid in school, I mean, you were always, getting picked on. People were throwing things at you. And that's just how it was. But if I had to go back and change it, I wouldn't. I wouldn't change anything. That's the reason why you and I are sitting here today, because of how we were brought up.
Yes. Those bullying, those rejection made you who you are. It made you to hate bullying. It made you to be the defender of the underdogs. It made you to hate injustice. It made you willing to stand up against any kind of injustice. They
That's right.
made you.
That's right. That was beautifully said.
And how can people contact you?
Well, if you can contact us at www.dodlaw.com, dodlaw.com. You can also call us at 619-814-5110, or the easiest phone number we have is 833-4-DOD-LAW, 833-4-DOD-LAW.
And what does it mean to you to come on Legal Angle and being a guest on this show, answering all these questions?
And like I said, truly, truly inspirational. Your video is phenomenal. I remember the first time I saw your video, I teared up. I was like, wow, this is, truly inspirational. And just to be sitting on this show in front of greatness is really an honor.
Thank you. It's an honor for me to interview greatness. I really
Thank you.
appreciate your time. I know we are 3 hour difference. It's really very early in California right now. Thank you for doing this show.
Thank you so much, Manny. Have a great day, man.
You too. And for those of you watching us or listening to this as a podcast, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Facebook page, and our Instagram page. Until next time, take care. Bye for now.
Thank you.